Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today I'm looking at a monitor, but it's not the usual sort of monitor review you see on the channel. Rather, I'm focused on a laptop display because it's super interesting. It's one of the few OLED laptop screens going around, and from testing this display we can learn a lot about how OLED might be suited to PC displays and how it compares to the LCD panels we've been using for a while now. The laptop with the OLED screen that I have in for review is the Gigabyte Aero 15 OLED. It's a creator-focused laptop, but it still packs a ton of great hardware. My model came with an Intel Core i7-9750H processor and NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2070 Max-Q graphics, but that can be upgraded as high as a Core i9-9980HK and RTX 2080 Max-Q GPUs. Plus, you get usual stuff like up to 32GB of RAM and 512GB SSDs. But this is not going to be a full laptop review. I've already covered the RTX 2070 Max-Q and the Core i7-9750H separately, so if you're interested in how they perform, there's other videos you can watch from us that go in depth on performance. This video is an investigation and full analysis of the OLED display because, yeah, it's really one of the more interesting screens to hit my desk recently. If you're not super familiar with OLED technology, I don't blame you because it's extremely uncommon to see an OLED paired with a PC. There have been a few laptops and monitors over the years to dabble in OLED, but up until now the technology has largely been kept to high-end TVs from companies like LG and a wide range of smartphones. However, in 2019, OLED is making a bit of a jump over to PCs through a new 15.6-inch OLED display for laptops and a few interesting professional OLED monitors for creators. Without going crazily deep into the specifics, OLED is fundamentally different to LCD. Rather than having a white backlight shine through liquid crystals to form colors like in an LCD, OLED pixels emit their own light. So basically they act as both the backlight and the crystal at the same time. This has significant benefits. OLEDs can have much higher contrast ratios, better viewing angles, better HDR performance, better color performance, and in some situations lower power consumption because each pixel can be properly individually controlled. The main downside being image retention, which I'll talk more about later. The OLED panel used on this laptop is a brand new one from Samsung's AMOLED division. It's a 15.6-inch 4K 60Hz panel, so nothing overly crazy there, but where it gets exciting is in its VESA Display HDR 400 True Black certification, indicating we're getting true HDR performance, as well as 100% DCI-P3 coverage. Yep, that's right, not 90%, not 95%, but 100% DCI-P3 coverage, which so far has been kinda hard to achieve with LCD technology, at least among monitors. Let's get straight into the testing here, and we'll start by looking at brightness. OLED screens operate differently to LCDs in that they often have a brightness limiter that controls how bright the display gets based on the average picture level of the content it's displaying. In contrast, LCDs will usually be capable of the same brightness in the SDR mode, regardless of whether they are displaying a 100% white window or a 1% white window. With that said, this new laptop OLED doesn't suffer much from brightness limits. While displaying a full white window, the panel was easily able to achieve 390 nits of brightness, which is actually higher than a lot of laptop LCDs. Then this increases to above 470 nits when the APL falls to 10% or lower. This difference between high and low APL brightness isn't all that severe and should be largely unnoticeable during use, which is great news. The contrast ratio is, of course, very impressive. That's because unlike with an LCD, OLED panels switch off entirely when displaying black content, so the contrast ratio is effectively infinite. This gives OLEDs noticeably deeper blacks than LCDs, and because the blacks are so deep and the contrast ratio is so high, it makes colors pop as a result. On top of this, OLEDs don't suffer from any backlight bleed or IPS glow issues, simply because these issues are impossible to get with this technology. For viewing dark content like that one episode in the final season of Game of Thrones, there is no better display to have than an OLED. OLEDs also have outstanding viewing angles, better than IPS and significantly better than TN LCDs. There is basically zero shift to brightness or colors when viewing this display at acute angles, to the point where you can basically see everything perfectly from any reasonable angle. This helps significantly with content creation. You don't need to sit in a sweet spot to see accurate colors, because colors are basically accurate from most angles. The screen does have a glossy finish, but handles reflections well, so you should be able to use it comfortably with backlighting. It also helps that the brightness the screen can achieve is quite high, which you do need to an extent with a laptop display. Gigabyte claims that their display is factory calibrated to a Delta E of below 1.0 and it comes X-Rite Pantone certified. There's a couple of modes available in the software. There's a specific Pantone mode as well as a standard mode, but I actually found the standard default mode is the most accurate out of the box. When measuring the Aero 15's OLED against sRGB, out-of-the-box performance is impressive. The only small nitpick I have is that the grayscale CCT average of 6157K is a little warm for general usage, and the gamma curve is slightly too high at the low end, but a Delta E average of 1.98 is better than your typical laptop display, and with some slight tweaks to CCT, it will be perfect for content creation. It's better than that for saturation sweeps with the Delta E average of just 1.36, getting very close to Gigabyte's rated 1.0 metric. This increases slightly to 1.78 in color checker, but in general this is excellent for content creators that need to work with the sRGB color space. What about for wide gamut work? Well, the factory calibrated Aero 15 is just as good there, and it doesn't require any profile switching or settings adjustments as the correct ICC profile is already preloaded out of the box. Grayscale performance is identical to the sRGB mode, while saturation performance is slightly better at a Delta E average of 1.31, again perfect for color accurate work. A color checker Delta E of below 1.7 is again fantastic here. Out of the box, the DCI-P3 color space covered was a little disappointing at just 95.6%. It's kind of funny saying disappointing here, given most LCDs can only hit 96% or so in the best cases, but Gigabyte did say 100% coverage and it falls a little short here. Or does it? When calibrating this display, I actually was able to increase the overall color gamut of both the sRGB and DCI-P3 modes to be right on the limit. Seems Gigabyte was being a little bit conservative here with their profile. Here you can see we're getting 99.5% DCI-P3 coverage, 99.8% sRGB coverage, and an impressive 93.5% Adobe RGB coverage, all from the same display. The total color gamut here is nearly 150% sRGB, which is elite. And when you combine all of this with great performance when calibrated, it's safe to say this Aero 15 OLED display is the best performing screen I've tested for color accurate work, especially in a laptop form factor. What about uniformity? Yep, that's pretty good too. As each individual pixel emits light, it is kind of hard sometimes to get everything uniform, but Samsung has done a wonderful job here. Almost the entire screen falls under a Delta E of 2.0 relative to the center. It's only the top left corner of my unit that deviated slightly, not that I could notice in most circumstances during general use. And while not a huge issue for content creation, gamers will be super excited about the response times here. I measured consistent times between 1.6 and 1.7 milliseconds for any given transition, which honestly is actually a little slow compared to the best LG OLED TVs that can transition faster than 1 millisecond. But this blows any LCD out of the water really. Even 1 millisecond rated LCDs are often more like 3 milliseconds in practice, so this is another area where OLED dominates LCD. While response times are awesome, the limited 60Hz refresh rate keeps the display from being the best for gaming. It's difficult for laptop hardware to drive a 4K display at 60 FPS in the latest titles, and while this display looks fantastic at a lower 1080p resolution where you'll get great performance, I think gamers will be better suited overall to a fast 144Hz 1080p laptop, which is more in the target range for this sort of performance. That said, can't wait until we see 120Hz OLEDs in laptops. That will be the best of both worlds for gamers. As far as HDR performance is concerned, the only way you're getting true HDR performance in a laptop form factor is with an OLED display, simply because you can't fit a full array local dimming backlight into a laptop form factor in any reasonable way right now. So OLED with a display HDR True Black rating is the way to go. I was actually surprised this OLED was only able to pass Display HDR 400 True Black certification rather than the highest Display HDR 500 True Black that's available for OLEDs. My unit was capable of 400 nits sustained brightness and well over 500 nits peak, which is the requirement for True Black 500. In fact, with a 10% window I was hitting 580 nits peak and in smaller windows up to 600 nits. A full screen flash of 400 nits also should have sufficed for Display HDR 500 True Black. Anyway, that's just a sticker on the box. Regardless of what certification this passes, it's a super impressive display. Looking at the HDR checklist, you can see it passes all the key metrics for true HDR performance. We're getting a high peak brightness of 600 nits, which looks even brighter with an OLED given its deep blacks. There's per pixel local dimming, which is better than any current LCD can achieve, even those with FALD backlights, and it's not even close. This actually blows LCDs with FALD backlights out of the water. And then there's a massive gamut, wider than most displays out there. Essentially, this is one of the best HDR displays for PC on the market, It's pretty insane. I watched some HDR video on this laptop while simultaneously viewing it on my LG OLED TV, and the experience was very similar. Slight edge goes to the LG OLED as it can get a bit brighter again, but seriously, I was blown away by the quality of this OLED for HDR video. It's miles ahead of the nearest LCD. HDR gaming is also impressive, although again at 60Hz it's probably not the best laptop for gaming. That said, if you're interested in getting a glimpse at what a true HDR experience is like, there is no better laptop than this with its OLED display. The major downside to this OLED panel is one that remains a bit up in the air, and that's image retention. OLEDs have come a long way in this department, but it's unclear how this specific Samsung AMOLED will handle long periods of use with static content. We know that LG OLED TVs, for example, take quite a long time to burn in. However, the tech used here is slightly different to Samsung's AMOLED. One of the main reasons why we haven't seen more OLED PC monitors is due to image retention. On a TV, this isn't as bad of a problem, as most content you'll be viewing, whether that's movies or TVs or games, is generally highly dynamic, and if there's any static content, it could be just a small logo that changes with different channels. However, PC usage has a static taskbar, often static navigation bars within apps, and large areas of static content, and this is a scenario that's prone to burn-in. But again, we just don't know how this panel will stand up to the test of time right now. Smartphones can have a lot of static content as well, and the latest models seem to do all right with burn-in, often using Samsung AMOLED tech. But Windows 10 usage is a step above again, doesn't quite have the same mitigations as Android, so this will be something to keep an eye on. I don't want to say it will definitely burn in over time, but there's a chance and you should be aware of it before purchasing. If you can get past the risk of burn-in though, this is the best laptop display on the market. There is no competitor that gets close really. We're seeing top of the chart performance in areas like contrast ratio, color performance, color gamut, response times, and HDR capabilities. Even areas where OLED can struggle like brightness are extremely impressive. The only other downside being its 60Hz refresh rate, which is fine for its target market of content creators. It also blows away most PC monitors, which is why I really hope we find a way to get more OLED displays up and running as monitors. As for the rest of the laptop, well, it's as good as Gigabyte's Aero 15 line has generally been, which is to say very good. Excellent performance, I love the compact design, great keyboard, the cooler seems a bit quieter than the last generation. I mean, yeah, it's a good laptop, and when you throw in an OLED display, it elevates it to the next level. It's not overly cheap though. My review unit as configured was $2,500 US, which is $500 more than the non-OLED model, or about $100 higher comparing MSRPs, but that's the price I guess you have to pay for quality. That's it for this look at the OLED display in the Gigabyte Aero 15. I really love OLED, and it's why I've got an OLED TV, and if I can get any other OLED monitors into review, you know I'll be all over that. You can subscribe for more monitor testing like this, consider supporting us on Patreon. I'll catch you in the next one.